Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by two special guests. Everyone's a special guest because they take time to join me on my show. Now, some of those have been following, I connect with people ahead of time. And sometimes the first time I meet people is on my podcast. And so that's the case for today. I have two gentlemen doing great work, elevating technology literacy to people all over the world. And I thought, hey, let's have a great conversation today about the importance of technology for education, especially for those that need additional resources. I'm joined by Kyle and Robbie, and I want them to introduce themselves briefly about a little bit of who they are, and then we'll have a great conversation about their company or their nonprofit per se, and just things to think about as we, elevate technology to populations that may not always have access.
Yeah, I'll go first. So my name is Robbie. I'm the founder of TechMySchool. Lifelong educator, started working in inner city schools in San Diego and Hawaii, went overseas and started working at the American diplomat schools, from teacher to teacher trainer to CTO or tech director, and lived in various places around the world. Kyle and I became friends and worked together when we were in Saudi Arabia at the American school in Jeddah. And went from Africa, Lagos, Nigeria to Puerto Rico, where I ended up starting a nonprofit called TechMySchool. And it's all about serving America's most underserved, underprivileged, all those check boxes. Puerto Rico hits them all by a long shot. And it's been a great journey. This is our 5th year, and I was able to convince Kyle to join me. So Kyle, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so just kid who grew up in Texas and didn't really know there was a world outside of my own community until I married this girl who grew up overseas, and she said, "Hey, why don't we move overseas?" So I thought, that sounds really fun. So we figured out who the organizations were that we could use to sort of look for work overseas, and we ended up in West Africa. Actually, that was our first stop, was in Cameroon, right next door to Lagos, where in Nigeria, where Robbie ended up later in his career. But we were in Cameroon, and then we were in Saudi Arabia, where Robbie and I met. Then we went to Switzerland after that, and then we were in Vietnam after that. So we kind of globetrotted 4 continents in 10 years, and then moved back to the States, and I became a director of technology and innovation at a big private school here in Houston. So it's a little similar, but a lot of differences. International schools are crazy and fun. There's never a dull moment. When we were in Jeddah together, we were at a school. It's K through 12, and it's an American curriculum. AP classes. It's just like you would think of sort of an American, just any school here in the U.S. Except for there were 1,200 kids, and they were from 50 countries. So you don't really have the opportunity to have cliques like you do here. That's not cliquey, because there's no group that's big enough to form a clique in a school that has people from 50 countries. So it's an interesting sort of distinction with international schools. And it's something that I missed when I was back here in the States. I was at Episcopal High School here in Houston, and it's a great school, but the kids at Episcopal are by and large all from the Houston metro area, right? So the sort of cultural differences that we experienced overseas, that was something that I definitely loved and missed.
Well, it's funny. It's like I'm a military brat myself, lived all, but my dad didn't get stationed in cool places. We kept on coming back to the DMV. So I never got to experience an international school this close at the end of my dad's career, where they said he wanted to go to Germany. I was like, no, please, I got to stay here. So I never went to school overseas. So I know that's quite an experience. Robbie, you said you had a background in education. Was it like Teach for America? That's how you got into the
No, it was
your background to get into teaching in the first place.
Yeah, so when I was in university my freshman year, I got an opportunity to work at an inner city school in Honolulu, and my thought at the time was, I just want to be a good dad one day. I'll mess around with some kids. But I fell in love with it, all the kind of feelings and all the experience I had when I was in elementary school kind of came rushing back. And for me, elementary school and school in general was always a sanctuary. I was the poor kid. I was the kid who didn't have anything, but school is where I got food. That was like, free lunches. School is where the teachers cared about me and, were paying attention to me, and there was electricity and all those kinds of things. So by the time I was 12, I was already working. And, by the time I was in college, I was super independent. So I'd kind of forgotten about a lot of that support and that system. And so going back into that school, it all came rushing back, like the system and the good feelings, the positive feelings. And yeah, this desire to serve, that's just kind of in my core values of myself. I want to serve and I want to help people. And so I knew my freshman year of college, I want to be an educator. So worked while I was in school, getting my undergraduate. I did the America's Reads program. I did all these different programs. And then when I graduated, I started working in public schools, again, inner city schools. And then my college roommate was from Sweden, and I was like, man, I got a chance to visit him. I'm like, man, I wish I could travel and teach. And that's how I heard about these international schools through the DODS program, Department of Defense. And I kind of opened up Pandora's box, and then I applied and I got a job, and I was just kind of off. And so I was overseas for about 15 years, different schools.
It definitely gets in your blood once you start traveling, though.
Yeah, it's so good. And so, yeah, I came to Puerto Rico from Nigeria because COVID happened. By that time, I went from teacher. I taught kindergarten, second, third, fourth, middle school. And then I became a technology integrator where I was like training teachers how to use technology. And then from technology integrator, I actually worked for Kyle. Kyle was the tech director at Jeddah. I came in to shadow him for a year as his assistant. And then he went on to Switzerland and I took over his role. So that's how we first met. And we only worked together for 1 year, but we kind of stayed bros throughout. And so I became like the CTO of schools. And then I was in Jeddah for 4, then Africa for 2. And then we decided to take a sabbatical year. And that's when we're like, oh, let's go to Puerto Rico, beautiful beach. I'll write a book on ed tech. And then we'll go back to this really cushy, awesome international lifestyle. But when I put my kids in the schools, I was thinking it was going to be just like Hawaii, not as good as California, but still America, because Puerto Rico is America. Everyone's an American citizen. You can come here tomorrow and get a job legally. Anyone from here can go to, DC and get a job legally or whatever. And I looked at the education. I was like, this looks like Africa. Like it looks so much like Nigeria. Why? Why are these American kids getting this like second, third world level of education? And I'm like, maybe I'm just going crazy. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But then I started to do some research, and statistically, if you look at the PISA scores, PISA, it's where they take all the countries and kind of have them take these standardized tests in math, reading, and science. And Puerto Rico is the outlier of the outlier. We're worse than Mexico. We're worse than Cambodia, worse than every European country, every North American place. We're the worst. It's the worst of the worst. And I was like, I'm not okay with this. Like, I'm supposed to be here for a year and to chill and write my book. But instead, I was like, I got to help these kids. And so I started with one school. I put my kids in the school, and I started helping that school. And I went from new parent to training all staff, like doing professional developments the first week, and then I, started buying them computers and softwares. And and then it just kind of took off from there. And so we went from one school to now serving 50. And then throughout this process, I was talking with Kyle, like, hey, Kyle, I'm in Puerto Rico. I'm doing this thing. I'm helping this school and, leveraging my network to say, like, how can I get computers for this school? How can I get extra stuff? And, Kyle was at a great school, and he's like, hey, I can get you guys some computers. And he would graciously donate some MacBooks and some iMacs and stuff. And we donate to the school and just transform a school. And we also do a Week Without Walls program where kids from the States or for wherever would come to Puerto Rico, be here for a week, experience the island, go like, paddleboarding and snorkeling and stuff. But then we'd also have them working in the schools, because I wanted them to see, this is your fellow American. See how your school is, and then how this school is. Like, do you not notice, like, what do you think about the differences with that? How does that make you feel, type of a thing? And really just open their eyes. And we were able to do that. And Kyle's school, he brought a group of kids down, and he was just so generous and so helpful, like throughout the whole process, from how we served, the donations, the Week Without Walls. And him and I are just kind of like thought partners, like brainstorming together. And we have this process where we go into schools and we do an audit. We do an analysis of this school. And then based off that analysis, we create a plan for that school, a strategic plan, like a tech plan. And then we help them fulfill it. So we give them what they need based off that data. And we really formalize this process. And I told Kyle, I'm like, hey, we'd love to reciprocate and do this for your school in Episcopal. And I'll let Kyle take it from here, basically, because he's at this really fancy school in Houston with all the money in the world. And he's also really smart, and he's got a bunch of PhDs on his staff. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, before I, do pass the ball, and I love your educational journey. Can Kyle, can you start kind of go back to yours again?
Oh, sure.
What did you study in school to be a teacher? I know you said you found your partner, and that's when you started studying, studying abroad. But were you were you interested in being an educator before this? No,
I'm gonna start in a place where you never saw this coming, but I started as a school bus driver. So I graduated from college. I had a music degree. I was actually an audio engineer, and I had moved to Minneapolis. My wife and I got married, and a good friend of hers from high school, her husband worked for a private school, and he was the director of transportation. And we had a New Year's Eve with them one night, and he said, hey, as long as you don't have a job while you're looking for work, come drive a school bus for me, $12 an hour, and you get health insurance. And I was like, that sounds better than the $0 an hour and no health insurance that I currently have. So I actually randomly kind of stumbled into it by taking, first of all, my ego. I was like, I'm not driving a school bus. I'm sorry. I have a college degree. I'm not doing that, and so what do they say? If you want to make God laugh, just tell him your plans, right? So I told him my plans. He laughed, and I then became a school bus driver. And what was cool about it is that during the middle of the day, I started talking to the administrators and the teachers at the school, and the woman who was one of the I think she was the head of their arts department. She said, hey, we'd love to have you on board here as a teacher, teaching music or something. That's what my degree was in. Why don't you start substitute teaching, and then, just get some reps in the classroom and see if you like it. And it was all over. I had 2 classes my first day, and I was like, this is really, really fun. I really enjoyed getting to connect with the kids. And I was a kid at the time too. I was probably 23 years old, and so these high school seniors are only 5 years younger than me. But I had such a good time doing it. I decided I went back home, I think, after doing it for a week, and I told my wife, I was like, I think this is actually what I want to do. It was so fulfilling to me, and for reasons so unlike how Robbie got started in it. I mean, I love Robbie's story, and I wish I could say I don't have the same story. I just am selfish and a narcissist, and I loved it. And so I'm like, this is fun. I'm going to do more of this.
Altruism.
Yeah, altruistic. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went back to school, and my wife and I, she had mentioned a few times how fun it was living overseas. She lived in several countries, and she grew up in West Africa, mostly in Ghana. But then we had dinner with another friend of hers who wasn't just a regular old suburban American girl from her, my wife's high school. We had dinner with her one night, and she had gone to Brazil to go to teach. And she was teaching English, doing more what people usually ask us when we say we taught overseas. They're like, oh, did you teach English? The answer is no, we didn't. We weren't like the Teach for America programs, or is that one's here locally, the JET program, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of different English centric programs that people do overseas. That was not what Robbie and I did. We were working in these K-12 schools. We're just like any teacher in a school, in the States. I was teaching computer science and biology. That's what I went back to school for, was biology. So I got essentially, without actually getting another degree, I did another 65 hours in the sciences after I already had a bachelor's degree, and taught science and loved it. But what was crazy is that back to this, you making God laugh by telling him your plans. I was like, okay, I've studied biology for another 4 years, kind of part-time while I was working, and finally got ready. All this stuff, we're going to teach biology. And with the first job fair I went to, I got hired as a tech coordinator for the school. Yeah. And I was like, wait, I just spent 4 or 5 years trying to become a science teacher, and they were like, well, you could probably do that here too. It was this small school in Yaoundé, Cameroon. And I ended up wearing a lot of hats there and having a lot of fun. I did end up teaching biology. I taught computer science. I taught filmmaking, graphic design. It was like a smattering of all these kind of random things that I got to sort of try on. And I absolutely loved the teaching piece and the tech leadership piece, because I was doing both when I was there. So the next job I took when I went to Saudi, I ended up becoming the director of technology at that school. It was a much larger school, better financed, more like much larger staff. I went from a school that had like 200 kids in it to a school that had 1,200 kids. So you have 5 times the number of teachers, which means a lot of systems need to be in place that they didn't necessarily need at the smaller school, or that I was too ignorant to know that they needed at that point in my career, right? So we're kind of learning as we go. There's that old commercial, I can't even remember what the company was, but where the guys are on an airplane and they're building the plane while they fly it. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of how this career feels when you get thrown into the deep end. The plane doesn't stop just because you don't know something, so we're kind of all about learning on the go. And what that's done for us is it's sort of it's kind of rewritten into our genome, that we're just infinitely flexible. Every day is just a new bucket of problems that we have to solve. And that's what teaching is. And that's especially working overseas and living overseas. We've gotten used to just having curveballs thrown at us, and you have to figure out what to do with them. And you get to the point where you kind of fall in love with that process of the unknown, the things that maybe earlier in your life scared you or seemed like problems now seem like opportunities. And I would say that, like, that's been one of the things I've loved about Robbie for all these years. And one of the reasons I did decide to go work with him full time was that he was the kind of guy that saw this school system in Puerto Rico. Most of us, let's be honest, we'd have been like, yeah, we can't stay here. If there's no place for my kid to go to school, let's leave, right? Let's go somewhere else. And Robbie's like, no, I'm just going to change things where I am. And that mindset is a completely different mindset than most people have. And there was a part of me, and I was just telling him this yesterday when we were having a little catch-up meeting after the holidays, but there was a part of me that was kind of jealous, actually. I'm like, you're an educator who actually put his money where his mouth is. We all say, and it's true, but we say, like, we're in it to serve kids. We're in it for the greater good. We're in it for the betterment of our society, our democracy, for all these things. And I'm like, actually, Robbie's doing it. He uses his own time, his own money, his own blood, sweat, and tears. Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone grind as hard as he and his wife do on the job at what they're doing with TechMySchool. I mean, they are on all the time, and it's unbelievable. And so for me, I was like, yeah, man, I'm in. Whatever you need from me. To go back to the Robbie's transitioning, throwing the mic to me, which is always dangerous, by the way. Him throwing the mic to me at the time when he was basically describing what they did for my school. So I was in a position where I was volunteering for him. We were, we brought kids down to Puerto Rico to kind of see where the computer donations had been going for these 3 years and get the kids involved. And that was transformational for the kids. But Robbie was like, hey, you guys have donated, X thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Let me just come and pay you back. And let me come and run this program for you that we do, like this assessment. And in my huge, expensive private school ego, I was thinking, like, what could you possibly teach us? We can basically afford all of the things that, a school would need to solve whatever problems come our way. And we had built some really amazing systems in that school. So, like, it wasn't unfounded that I was really proud of what, the school had built and what I had built while I was there. But when he came, it was a really good lesson in humility, and like, truth lives all over the place, and sometimes you don't see it coming, right? So he came in and ran us through the same assessment that he would run any school through, from the highest performing to the most struggling school. It turns out that this thing that he has created, this assessment, it works for everybody, because it's not him coming in to tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. It's him just asking you questions about your mission and your vision and your values, and what you want from technology at your institution. Not what you should be doing, but what do you actually want from it? And are your actions lining up with what you say you want? And so going through this process, we learned so much about ourselves because of this sort of open-ended format. It was all about relationships. It was all about conversations. And what we realized some things that in hindsight were like, of course, one of them was that we had the money to solve a lot of problems that some schools can't solve because they don't have the resources. So like the systems that we had put in place were absolutely top tier, top notch, and that's what I was basing my ego on, I think, were the systems we built. But he's like, okay, wait, there are actually two more buckets that we're looking at. We're looking at adult learning and how that works in the organization, in the building, around like the culture of learning, and then student empowerment. How are the decisions about technology actually empowering kids, or are they disempowering kids? And so what we found was like we identified so many growth areas for sort of from a culture aspect and a growth mindset aspect. And so I told Robbie, I was like, this is unlike any professional experience I've ever had. I've never been so happy to be so humiliated. And it was my pleasure to get involved and come on board and say, listen, what I want to be an agent of change and growth, just like what you did for my school. I want to go and do that for other people. I want other people to like have that experience that I had, this massive aha moment. So that's pretty much that's the story.
Well, it seems like y'all didn't like go back and, study computer science and have IT and tech degrees. You were more educators that found technology as the vehicle. So Robbie, can you talk about like your traditional educational background? You're like, you know what? One of the key components of this, curriculum and all that is, do they have the tools, right? Like I'm teaching math and science, but then they don't have calculators, right? So can you talk about that kind of like that aha moment where you're teaching a subject matter, but then you realize that technology is the tool that it really is not, it's disproportionate. The access to that technology is disproportionate, regardless of the curriculum and what you're trying to teach.
So basically, I mean, even when you're at university, I knew freshman year of college, I wanted to be a teacher, and you say, okay, what degree is elementary school teaching? They really don't have a degree that's called elementary school teaching. In California, in San Diego, it was called liberal studies. So I studied liberal studies in California. But then as I became a teacher, and I found what I gravitate to just organically, again, my own core values, like, in essence, is two things. One is I love to learn and I love to help. I love to serve. And so with technology, you always are learning because there's things that are happening constantly. There's always a new tech application, a new Elon Musk, whatever. So there's always something happening, especially now. It's exponential. It's like insane. It's almost at a point where I can't keep up, and this is my industry. So I love learning. So tech always has learning, and then someone always needs help learning it. So hey, I just learned this cool tool. Let me show you what it's like. And another thing too is like when you go into education and you're a teacher, and you're like, I want something more than just the classroom. I want to do something more with my career. When you're climbing the ladder, there's a few pathways you can take. And the most traditional one is to go into leadership. So you're going in to be a principal or whatever. And there's a big component to that, which is, besides the vision, is discipline. So disciplining teachers, disciplining students, and there's kind of some negative connotations that come with the administrator and being the boss. And I don't like that. Personally, I don't like being that guy. With technology, it's all about like positivity, excitement. I'm a rah guy. I can go in there, get everyone jazzed up, and then I can go. And that's it. Like it's all positive vibes. So I wanted to stay positive. So that was another reason why I went into it. So when I knew technology was kind of the avenue and, venue I wanted to pursue, I went back. I was in Qatar and I was working at an international school there. And I went back to California and I went to a school in Silicon Valley. And I got my master's in San Francisco in educational IT. So I got my master's in ed tech so I could learn the foundational concepts and, really immerse myself through osmosis of being in Silicon Valley and just all the practicum to be the person I wanted to be, which was this tech leader in schools. And then from Silicon Valley is when I went on to meet Kyle. So that essentially is my journey into it. And then even now when we go into schools, our company name is TechMySchool, and the word technology, it's a powerful word, technology. There's a lot of emotion that come into with technology because some people, honestly, they hate it. They hate everything about it. They hate the screens, they hate the phones, they hate the not being connected or present. They hate the fact that everything changes constantly. They hate the fact the button moved from this part of the screen to that part of the screen. They hate the fact that it's designed by engineers and tech people who aren't normal people. And so they're like, it makes sense in the engineer's brain, but in the regular person's brain, we're like, what did you guys do this? So, yeah. And a lot of times teachers feel intimidated by technology because when I'm a teacher, I'm in front of people. I want to be very confident with what I'm talking about. I want to be the expert. And if I throw at them, hey, here's this tech tool that you know nothing about. Now you have to go teach it to other kids. They don't feel good about that. They're like, I don't know what this is myself. How am I going to teach it? So there's this way that teachers are, and it's just a natural human defense mechanism where it's kind of like, rather than taking on this growth mindset and admitting openly to everyone, I don't know this, but I know this is good. So I'm going to learn it and we're going to learn together. Is that okay, everyone? Instead of having that mindset, there's almost like this mindset of like, that's a fad. We don't need that. I've been my whole life without learning this tool and I'm still here. Why do I need to learn this new thing? There's just going to be another one tomorrow. So there is that, friction that we come into contact with, on a daily basis. So it's our job to be fun, positive, raw, but also empathetic, be learners, be listeners, so we can really connect with those teachers and help guide them. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, our job is to give students an opportunity to be successful in this unknown informational AI economy. And if we're doing things in these traditional ways that we were exposed to in the 80s and 90s or whatever, we're not doing them as service. We're doing ourselves a service because it's easier for us to, teach in the way that we were taught because we know it. But these kids are going to graduate memorizing a bunch of facts, but not knowing how to use AI prompts to build apps or whatever that could propel their career, get them a job.
And this could be for both of y'all, but when I'm thinking about, as an educator at George Mason University, I'm thinking about like how this is all a system, right? Like if they don't have access at a young age and then they go to college and they don't know how to use just their own laptop and everyone got a laptop, how much that sets you behind, to type it's very simple type of paper or how to send emails, the technology literacy, right? And one of the things I thought about, which was exacerbated by COVID, was that once COVID shut down, it really exacerbated broadband access and how, and even in American communities, that not everyone had access to technology unless they was in the schools, right? Like not everyone had a Chromebook. And then they realized, wow, we have kids that had no Wi-Fi. They had to sit at a Starbucks in the parking lot to do that. And from what I'm hearing is that you see that on like a 10th level degree here in Puerto Rico. Like, how are we going to, the next level of going to work or
100%.
The economy where they don't even have the all the devices and all that. So can you talk about that? And maybe Kyle, to the second point, like how like is I want Robbie to talk about that, seeing it there on the ground, but I want you to talk about like how we take that for granted. Like I probably wouldn't have realized how, like, dang, having internet is a blessing. But then you went to Puerto Rico and was like, oh my God, I'm at this elite school. But go ahead,
Yeah,
Robbie.
so one of the privileges I've had is the fact that I've traveled a lot. So I've been to 65 countries and I've seen just lots of different countries and lots of different schools and lots of different people. And one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be an American is because I've been to other countries and seen it. Like before I traveled, I thought Americans were this terrible place. We're this racist country. We have all these problems. And like, if you just watch the news, we're like this hellscape that we just, you know what I mean? But then when you travel and you go to these other countries, you're like, oh my gosh, like we are the least racist country in the world. It may not seem like it, but we are the least racist because these other countries, it's like they're racist and they're like, that's just a matter of fact. Or they will have school systems where it doesn't matter how hard you work, whatever, you're not the right gender, you're not the right religion, you don't have the right last name, you're not from the right tribe, you'll never amount to anything. And so really the golden ticket of that American passport is having that rope, that American education where even when I was in the inner city, I would always see kids, the ones who really worked hard, they would get their A's and go on and do big things in their life. The school system was there for them. Their challenge was all the social stuff around them, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's gangs, whatever. The school systems they're still there. There are things in that school that, and if they study hard, they can make it. In Puerto Rico, it was the opposite. I saw these American kids where good families, they really want to try hard, everyone's bought in, but the school systems are broken. Where I'm talking to 17-year-old kids, they barely speak English, they're reading at a 4th grade level, they've never touched a computer before, they're the good kids, and it's like, good luck. Now you're going to go compete against your contemporaries, your fellow Americans in Washington, in New York, in California. And I'm like, I know what a senior in high school looks like and what their capacity is compared to these kids here in Puerto Rico. It's insane. So I was like, I'm not okay with this. And that's kind of what made me do this. That was the call to action, was that, like, I've always been about service and about helping. But I mean, if Puerto Rico had like a Mississippi level, no offense to Mississippi, but if it had like a, give me your name of your state that's low, Arizona, Mississippi, Hawaii, whatever. If it was at that level, I'd be like, I'm good. I'm just going to buy a boat. I'm going to fish, and I'm going to keep it moving. But because it was so bad, I was like, I got to do something. And, education, technology, everything, there's such a direct corollary between a country's success and education. High GDP, high test scores; low GDP, low test scores.
And Kyle, what about the Tale of Two Cities where you saw this? I think it's really hard to conceptualize this. Like, I can't even conceptualize. We talk about like rural Virginia compared to Northern Virginia, right? That's all but I can't imagine another level. But you saw this other level. How's that?
Yeah, and I traveled the same way that Robbie did. I lived in developing countries as well, so I've seen that same disparity that he's talking about. So if he were to explain that to you, I think that would land differently than when he explained it to me. Like remember what it looked like in rural Vietnam. Remember what it looked like in Cameroon. That's kind of what it looks like in Puerto Rico, and why. So yeah, that definitely hit home and struck a chord with me. So I would say that there's several things at play that I would point out here. The illustration I like to give in terms of access would be like if I was a car manufacturer, if I'm Elon Musk and I make, it's the second Elon Musk reference we've made. We're not like huge fans necessarily, but here we are. Okay, he's a fan. I'm Elon Musk agnostic, but like, let's say I have a car company. I just use that because it's a large commodity. If I'm going to produce 1 million cars in a year, the third one that came off the assembly line and the millionth one that came off the assembly line cost me the same amount of money to make, essentially, right? Like, it's expensive. So if I give a car sell it to a rich person or give it to a poor person, my cost is the same no matter what. And so giving cars away to impoverished places is a really difficult thing because that's really expensive. Software does not work that way. And access to things like the internet, they don't cost the same that these other commodities do. So technology has a unique ability to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots if we would only allow it to happen that way. Because if I make a piece of software, it does not cost me very much money to let an underprivileged, even no matter how much I charge you for that software. Yes, development, R&D is a thing. It's a cost. I have employees, I have overhead. I'm not making cars. I have software that's already completed. And if I sell the software to 10 schools, or if I sell it to 10 and then give it to 10, my costs are almost identical. You see where this is going, right? Like, there is something in terms of the equity problem that we face here because capitalism has made this a really difficult experience for the underprivileged. Now, like, being in a position of middle class and above, you have access to some of these tools. And yeah, you're right. We take them for granted. And I think COVID was a really good slap in the face in a lot of ways to help point out, like, for I think the definition of privilege is the stuff that you don't even know you have, right? Like, all of us had privileges that we didn't even realize that we had, right, at that time. So what we've done with TechMySchool is we believe that technology has the ability to bring the tide up, right? They say a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you can get the tide up, you can bring up You can level that playing field a little bit. And so that's kind of the part of the mission of TechMySchool, is to increase access for the places and the people who don't have access. In that spirit, we've actually created, we call it equity-based pricing. So we resell software, we resell educational software, and we act as a philanthropic arm for a bunch of ed tech companies, because what we do is we ask them to reduce their prices based on a school's ability to pay us. So if you're a school like the one I work for, you're not going to get discounts from us because you have the money to be able to pay. The company would give us a small discount so that we can make what a reseller would make for reselling a piece of software, right? So that relationship is pretty standardized and pretty well developed. But what we've developed that doesn't exist in the sort of capitalist marketplace is when you're selling that same piece of software to someone who cannot afford it. The way things work right now is they don't get to buy it because they can't afford it. And so what we've done is we've asked those companies, would you please help us to serve those places, those kids that just don't have access because they're at a school that, they didn't have the money for a $30,000 a year education for, a middle school kid. They're in a school that is like a public school or a charter school or someplace in Puerto Rico where they just don't have the money to be able to access these tools. So we've got some really amazing partners. One of them is Flint AI. They have partnered with us. We've been able to serve underprivileged schools with their products. Their product is really good and it's really expensive, and it should be really expensive. They created a great product, but then they also said, you know what, like, we're educators too, and we want to give back and we love what you're doing. So there are schools where we are able to get like 80% off for the school or 90% off, or some of the schools, the donations that we bring in, one of the ways we use our donation money is that we pay the difference, right? So even if that company is only charging 10 or 20% of their retail price, we take care of that payment, and then we give it to the school for free because the school literally had no money. And when we can get, like, if you imagine a really wealthy school and a really impoverished school had access to all of the same tools, they're actually going to be learning at a fairly similar rate, right? There's nothing that can replace having fantastic teachers. There's a lot of research. John Hattie's research, he did research on the quality of teachers being essential. So in that spirit, another piece, the real value add of TechMySchool is that we train teachers. So the teachers in Puerto Rico by and large, haven't had formal training to be teachers. So Robbie and I, as people who like you identified really well, Philip, though, we're educators who got into technology. We're not IT people that got into education. It's the other way around. And so for us, we look at technology through the eyes of an educator. And what Robbie's been able to identify in these schools is just as big of a problem as not having access to the technology is that you haven't had access to modern thought in teaching and learning, and so we are also going into these schools and helping to train teachers in terms of modern pedagogy and helping them to see like how brain learning actually works, because we're steeped in the research and they've never seen it. So that's kind of what we do full on, is that we are trying to give kids and teachers access to all of the tools that they need in order to become successful in this economy, not the one that we grew up in. This economy is different. And if without tech, you're not going to participate. You're just going to be on the sideline.
I love it. That's like free reduced lunch, thinking about sliding scale and how those programs are. If they didn't have free reduced lunch, then kids would not get a meal, right? And we think about that sliding scale is very important. That was one of the things, honestly, my father-in-law, who I always give a shout out, was instrumental in that, the free reduced lunch program. And that was his advocacy, but he understood that there needed to be a policy part, right? And so I have kind of two questions. One question is more so like, how do you get the buy-in for an organization to participate in a sliding scale with technology, right? Like pulling their heartstrings. People always going to say, what's the ROI for them? Well, then, maybe ROI is like, then we're going to increase the workforce. So if we do this now, we'll have better workers in the future. So that's a buy-in. And then second question is, how do you get that more so thinking about I think there has to be a policy part of it, right? Like universal access. And, Robbie, you're saying, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, but then how come they're not getting the same resources as the states? So I wanted those 2 points, the ROI for these organizations that participate on a sliding scale, but more so this also systemic policy side about elevating Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, really with companies, I think though we are a capitalist country, I do think this story in itself and what we're serving and how we're, helping the island and the kids, that part's really easy for them to see like, oh, these guys are doing great work. We can see it. Let's do it for them because that's just kind of like the right thing to do. One of the ROIs is, as someone who owns software, you want people to use your software. And so, right. And so it's better if no one's using it, what's the point? So we're able to not only, because a lot of companies will come in, it's pretty well known where education is in Puerto Rico. And what they'll do is they'll come in and try to give it away to schools for free. And I know many people who've tried to come into Puerto Rico and tried to give away software for free, but it never lands because people a lot of times don't respect free, or they just don't have the capacity for it. So, one of our partners is reading.com. Owners at reading.com. He moved from the States to Puerto Rico. He lives here. And he tried to give it to Department of Education. He tried to give reading.com to the schools, and it was just, they didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to take him in. They didn't, it was like he didn't have the secret sauce to do it. And he's like, guys, just take it, And so for us, when we're coming into schools, we kind of have this carrot of, hey, well, do you guys want free iPads? Do you guys want free computers? Sure. And then once we get in there, we're like, oh, okay, now that you have these computers, how do you teach math? How do you teach reading? And so we're using that as kind of the carrot to get what we want, which is to build this successful, sustainable change for these kids and really tap into, how things are structured. And again, the formula is very conversational. It's very, self-assessment based. We don't come in and tell you if you're good or not. We just provide frameworks that you self-assess yourself, and then we act as, guides for you. And so through that process, we get that buy-in. We also put incentive structures in place where if you use this software X amount of times, we're going to get you more tech, or we're going to give you this for free or whatever. And so those buy-ins have been really great. So I think for companies, they're seeing the return in sense of people are using their software. They're getting, because anytime, even for their shareholders, they want to see users, they want to see usage. So that's a positive thing. They're getting the usage, they're getting usage and users. They're getting the images and all the videos of us sending it back, and they can see it when they're on our socials, like it's being used. We're shouting them out all the time. And then if it's on a sliding scale, so in terms of just equitability, we base it off of, if it's a private school, what the tuition is. So one of the things that's unique about Puerto Rico is there's about half the schools on the island are public and half the island are private. So it's not just a small percentage, it's a large percentage. And part of the reason is because there's such a shortage of teachers here that there's no substitutes. So if you go to school and you're a working family and you put your kid in school and the teacher calls in sick because they're going, they're sick for a week, or they're going on vacation for a month or whatever, the school just calls you and says, hey, pick your kid up, come back in 3 weeks. There's no substitutes. And so you can't work if you have that. And so because of that, there's all these private schools, and these private schools aren't the way we think of private schools. It's like the tuition is $200 a month, and all it is just babysitter, right? It's like the teachers are making like $1,500, $1,800 a month. It's Africa. It's the chalkboard, the desk, the fan, and that's it. And so half the schools in Puerto Rico are predominantly like this. I mean, there's a few real, let's call them private schools, where they're like the well-to-do families and, privilege and those kinds of things. But most are these private schools that are just keeping the lights on. And so when we tell these companies like, hey, this is the tuition for this school, it's $200 a month per kid, they're just like, just take it, or 10% or 20% or whatever. And again, we're not, if we were doing it with thousands of schools and if the numbers were massive, then maybe it'd be a little different. But we've served 50 schools, which is not nothing. But if I was doing the state of Texas or something, there's so many, those numbers become a lot larger. And so maybe they'd feel a little bit different about it. But we're a good charity case, I guess you could say. And I think that is some ROI in itself.
So for me to hit that same question about the motivation and the ROI and how do you motivate, you hit the nail on the head with the tugging on the heartstrings is that's one piece. Robbie's right. That's real. People feel that like, hey, this is just the right thing to do. And I would say that the majority of people are good people, and the people who just haven't done a lot of charity work, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they've not prioritized it and or they've never found the sort of space in their own financial situation to be able to justify whatever donations or time or and so there is a piece, I think, programmed into all of us that we want to help the underdog. And the fact that we're already doing it, I think, says a lot to people. And they're like, oh, so it actually won't really cost me anything to help you. And to me, a dollar that I find on the ground versus one that I've earned versus one that you begrudgingly hand over, that dollar does the same amount of work for these kids, right? So like we don't judge anybody based on like their motivations for helping us. Sometimes it is more selfish, and that's totally okay with me. And what I mean by that is like we offer them amazing PR. We give you pictures and videos and stuff of us handing whatever it is you donated to kids in this classroom setting that Robbie described. Those pictures those are money to them, right? Those are like, hey, they're like corporate responsibility. Look, we're giving back. And we're happy to provide that for people because they are giving back. Like we are a means, we're a vehicle for them to do good work. So if that's their motivation, that they want great PR from it, that's totally fine, because what that equals is they donated to us and that dollar went to these kids and we put it to work, right? For the same reason, or in the same way that we would if you just were the most, philanthropic of people who, gave us $10,000 and we put that to work, right? $10,000 is $10,000. It doesn't matter. It does matter how we got it, but I'm just saying like the impact is the same no matter how that money got to us, right? So we love helping people to feel good about doing good. But at the same time, I think that there's whether we talk about this or not in the United States, I think that there's an expectation that people give back. I think we have that. And I would say like by and large, most people don't give back in very systematic ways. They'll help out a stranger sometimes when a stranger needs help, or they'll, maybe they donate at church or at their mosque or something. But I think that like we're offering a system. We're offering like a systemic way for a corporate entity to give back. And we make it really, really easy for them to do it. So I don't know. I think that like we've tapped into something by appealing to their better angels and kind of creating a system for them to be able to give.
And then maybe for the policy part, right? I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong. I think so. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. I think they don't really have full representation, and so systemically, is that why it's not really up to the par of the states and stuff? Why is there such a discrepancy?
Yeah, it's a great question.
The United States, and I think that's the more the policy part. Like, how can we? They need to get the public schools. Fairfield, Virginia is a Virginia school, and they get the state funding, and then trickles down federal funding, yada yada yada. But obviously,
you probably won't love the answer.
Yeah,
go ahead. I love that. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I do live here, so but from what I've learned and what I've seen is that money comes from the federal government to a centralized Department of Education here in Puerto Rico. And unfortunately, like Africa, like many of these other countries where, these kind of problems exist, corruption exists alongside it. And so this money comes in and then it's either appropriated or misappropriated in certain ways. Or sometimes it's just not used. So sometimes they'll have like, okay, we're going to give you $10 million to do X, Y, Z. We need this paperwork. And then they just won't do the paperwork. So they don't get the money. Or it'll be a situation where somebody's cousin gets appointed as the guy who sells the school's computers. Computers cost $200, but he's going to sell it to the school system for $2,000 a computer and take that $1,800 profit per computer for himself. And then he'll sell many computers, and that's where all the money went. So where'd the money go? It went to computers, but it wasn't done in that way. So anyone wants to do the research on it, you can find research. And what really sucks is that the narrative has always been these local politicians have always been corrupt and they've been stealing and it's so bad. And so they actually brought in this white gringo lady to be the Secretary of Education for Puerto Rico. And it was like, and sure enough, immediately she went into theft mode. And so what she ended up doing was taking favors from local politicians, local people to like get her like penthouse apartments. And she was like selling off schools that like local public schools that were in good locations. She would sell those properties off to developers so they could bulldoze a school and put a hotel or something. And then she would make money. So she grifted like, I don't know, I think it's like 20 million or something stupid. She ended up going to prison, but it was like, okay. And then the next one's in there. So it wasn't like the people who came from the mainland did a better job. So it's kind of a sore subject. But ultimately, there is money that comes here. I mean, there's some articles I've read where it said like $3.5 billion come to Puerto Rico every year. And then if you look at the average per pupil in the United States, I think it's like 12,000 or 14,000 per student. I've heard reports here where it's 25,000 a student. So why isn't it all amazing here? Well, again, that money's centralized and appropriated or not appropriated or misappropriated or whatever. So yeah, I don't have all the answers to that. I heard stories, I read articles, I've heard word of mouth from people. I see with my eyes what's going on, and it's like, I could just be like, whatever, I'm out of here.
And it's not a state, so they don't have the same oversight.
Yeah, that's the thing. And for my thought is then, and that's where my question was more so like, you're doing the grassroots efforts, and you're combating a very systemic thing, and obviously and I asked that question because there's a lot of naivety. Like I didn't know like how much money going to Puerto Rico and all that stuff, and
when I got here,
it's kind of like those disaster reliefs, right? They get hit by hurricanes and you send all this money, but then they don't actually get the money when they, do the donations, right? And you're like, where? And so, I don't know. It's like sometimes that's not like that salmon swimming upstream. Like, what keeps you giving? What keeps you doing a good fight, knowing that like you're on the ground doing a good fight, but then also there's this huge system. That's kinda, a challenge.
Thankfully, I'm in a position to where I can be that agent of change because I have the background and the knowledge and know how to implement that change. So when we raise money for schools, we work with schools at the leadership level and then work top down. We know where every dollar is going. We put together the end of year reports. So yes, we don't have the same or any of the money coming from the Department of Education. We have these donations that we get from people that we meet on the island. But we know where it's going and we can put it into practice and we see the work. And why do I do what I do is just simply, or why we do what we do is simply the fact that I don't work for the government. I don't work for the teachers. I don't work for the school. I work for the kids. And so I know if I could go to a school, they don't have a library, no one has computers, and the teachers are teaching off of a chalkboard. And now after, a couple years, they've got an interactive 21st century library. Every kid's got a device. Every teacher's got a device. I got multiple softwares that are being used. I'm tracking the data and I'm pushing it in the classroom. I'm training the teachers every month. They have, a podcast studio and all these different things that they didn't have before. It's like, I see it, I see the change in anyone in our video. So it's like, I know they're going to get that impact. And I mean, I wish I could, we have an MOU with the Department of Education. We do serve public schools. We'll serve any school, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. We can't change everything, but we know we can, that doesn't mean we can't make change. And so we just make the change that we can make and we keep, getting after it. And one good step in the right direction leads to the next and to the next. So I think that's the big thing is just knowing that we work for the kids and we're there to support them. And when it comes to Puerto Rico, I mean, even my own family, they're like, why are you in Puerto Rico? Do I need a passport to come see you? Do you even have, what kind of money do you have there? I'm like, there's Costco, there's USPS, there's National Park Service. The only difference between Puerto Rico and Hawaii, because I used to live in Hawaii, is the fact that the Japanese bombed the Hawaii. and Germans didn't bomb Puerto Rico. If the Germans would have sent a fleet over and bombed Puerto Rico would have become the state and Hawaii would still be the territory because they were acquired at the same time historically. It's been a part of America since 1898. And so it's like before Arizona was a state, Puerto Rico had American citizens in it. You know what I mean? It's like it's been a part of America for such a long time. That's a whole nother discussion as to why Puerto Rico isn't a state. But it's been a part of our country for so long. It's just kind of like this weird, it's like the Harry Potter of America. You know what I mean? We're living underneath the bridge and like we're part of the family, but we get treated like we're not. And growing up, I was kind of that Harry Potter kid. So, you know, living with my cousins and being that poor kid and all that kind of stuff. So like I really resonate with Puerto Rico's story because that was my story growing up, even though I was in the States, just on a personal level. So I know how it is. I know what it's like to be that kid.
Well, first of all, I just love the reference. Well, I'm a history major. I love the history, and I'm gonna go back and read some more because like I said, the naivety about it. I'm like, I know, a little bit about Puerto Rican history, but not as much, and it's not as much known. You know what I'm saying? And then the Harry Potter reference, man, you get A+ on that. Talking about living under the stairs and stuff. That's crazy. Harry,
Yeah.
with the scar on his head. That's crazy. I think we could have definitely have more time, but I definitely want to leave a moment. I call it shot for shot. I'm just going to ask, instead of doing, both of y'all can ask me one question together and I'll ask y'all one question. It's just a random question. I always do it at the end of my show. Are you ready? All right. What part of Puerto Rican culture do you think America, America, well, they are American, but the mainland America needs to adopt? Man, when I've been here at Puerto Rico, they doing this right. And this is something that mainland America needs to adopt.
I have an answer for that. And Robbie, if you got an answer for that one right away, because you live there.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't say there's a lot of things that come to mind. But I would say they really try to do the Duolingo thing. So there's two languages. So there's Spanish and English. It's a Latin country, but it's also American country so they've got both. People on my team, they speak English, they speak Spanish. It's both languages. And so I would say, I think America, we have this kind of, I'm not gonna say an elitist personality or mindset, but we're kind of introspective rather than atrospective. And so what I mean by that is that, we think, okay, we know English, everyone's got to conform to us. You got to learn English because we're the second language of the world, and we don't have to learn other languages. And I think that having an open mindset and learning other languages would be a real benefit because these Americans here speak Spanish and English. And I think, we try to some extent, but I think there's more of it happening here.
Yeah, I would say the thing that this is not specifically unique to Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico embodies this. And I've seen this in a few places where we've lived, but time being not considered the valued commodity that we value it as. Time is money. That's what we say, right? Time is money. Things work on island time in Puerto Rico, like stuff, people show up when they show up, and there's a vibe to it. It's definitely like people who've traveled in the Caribbean. It's not specifically unique to Puerto Rico, but there's something about the just sitting back and relaxing and enjoying the people around you and really digging deep into relationships and taking the time. They are not transactional in the same way that we tend to be. So I kind of love that about them.
That one last thing is they have great family values. So the nuclear family, like mom, dad, grandma, staying close with family, they really cherish that here. And there's that kind of 1950s vibe where, you know what I mean? Like that Leave It to Beaver, like mom and all that stuff. For me as a parent, I love that. I want my kids to value their parents and value their experiences, where I feel like coming from Southern California, it's always all my problems are because of my parents. The parents are the antagonists in all the TV shows, or the dad is always this buffoon character, you know what I mean? And always in the way. And so it's the opposite here. There's this honor to their parents and that kind of thing. And I think that those family values are really important, and many countries do that, but they have that here in Puerto Rico. And I wish that was more in the States.
Lauren, shout out. I love that Bad Bunny is doing the Super Bowl. I don't know a lick of Spanish, but I've been listening to him. He on my Apple Music. He's taken over the last quarter, I'm just doing it because of statements. So I don't know what he'd be saying, but I'm learning
Don't
unofficially. So
translate the words.
I know that the Apple does that. And I look at it and I'm like, man, that's my junk right there. You know what I'm saying? And Tia Pregunta and all that stuff. I'm rocking with that. What's your question for me?
Yeah, my question for you is, what makes you want to do podcasting? Why are you into this space? And
Yep.
what is it that keeps you going? Because I have friends who started the podcasting journey and they quickly became burned out. They did it for a year. They've got like 100 episodes, 200 episodes, whatever. They're not getting the views they thought they were going to get. They didn't become a star, and it kind of fizzles out.
Yep.
What keeps you going? You know, like why did you start, and why do you keep?
I love it. And I mean, that's the first time someone said that one, more so now that's the origin story why I got started. So I've been podcasting since 2017. I was doing them. I was doing these like YouTube videos in my car, and I realized like ain't nobody watching these videos. So I asked my friend what a podcast was, and he told me it's like a radio show. And I was like, all right, bet. And I will say, no, not monetized. I'm not no Joe Rogan top 1%er, but for me, it's the storytelling, right? Like I've met a lot of good people, the connections, the social capital that I've gained from podcasting is what kept me going. So let me like social capital mean like I met new people, I've got an opportunity to talk to people that wouldn't give me a time of day unless I said, hey, I got a podcast, I shoot my shot, like with presidents of my fraternity and all that. And so it's been a great way to open doors and meet new people. And then I would say very, very at the end of it too. I hate the sound of my voice, but I've listened to my own episodes and it's became a way for me to be more confident as a public speaker and talking. I've listened to the episode with my dad and it was just like, almost like he's still alive, but giving me fatherly advice and hearing his voice. That's one. Or my father-in-law who passed away. My mother-in-law won't listen to it. My wife listened to it once. I listened to the one with my father-in-law that passed away at least once a month just to hear his voice because we were very close. And it's like an archive. Like, man, let me see how I was feeling, who I was back in 2017. Let me listen to, oh my God, I listened to my first episode the other day and I was like, Jesus Christ, like I've transformed. So at bare minimum, this sounds really selfish to say, I don't care if only 2 people listen. This ain't for them, it's for me. Like I told people, like, if you created content or created a podcast with the notion that you're going to become famous, you're going to be jaded. It's only 1%er. You can get monetized, but I would say at the same time, if you have it as a tool to help you be a better person, it's great. Like for one, it helped me become more confident in speaking. I could talk to this virtual audience. I can go talk to anybody in the face. 500 people have done it, public speaking. It's taught me technology skills. I did not get a degree in, AV and audiovisual and stuff like that. I got a degree in history, but it's taught me how to use technology by tinkering. So that's that. And it taught me like project management, how to be organized, how to like time block, how to do marketing. And so it's a real tangible skill. And at the end of the day, I don't care if no one listens. I'm going to listen to myself and connect with people. And I would say this, I always tell people to avoid burnout is do seasons. I've been very strict with boundaries. Like I'm recording right now. Once the semester starts, I'm not recording no more. Like I've recorded as much as I can, and then I set them to release, and then I get back to recording over the summer. I have made it fit my ups and downs in my life. If I need to take a break for a year or longer, I will. But to your point too, I'm always going to at least try to come back. I'm not going to let it completely die out, but I will give myself breaks. I think one time, the first thing I heard was, they said over 60% of podcasts die within the first year or within 10 episodes because people get jaded. And I remember when I did that, I was like, I'm going to make 1 year and I'm going to make 10 episodes. That was my first promise to myself. And now it's more so like, I'm just going to keep going. But if I need to take breaks, I'll take breaks. So
I wanted to say, I appreciate, I can tell that you listen very deeply and like you pulled some insights out of the things that we said, while we were talking and then ask good follow-ups. So I appreciate I do think that maybe one skill that you've built that you have not identified just now is the ability to listen more deeply for real connection and context. And that's because we do podcasts sometimes with people who are really new and they're just waiting to ask their next question. And that it's a skill. So you're probably a better listener now because you did it too.
You must know my father-in-law story. One time he was like, Phil, he was like, my father was like, I really love your podcast, but you talk too much. I don't want to hear you. I want to hear the guest. And I was like, dang, Jeff. But he was real, as a moderator, it's once again another skill. I've done panels and moderated panels. This skill has been you see I'm taking notes and stuff. I've learned to use my active listening and say, okay, let me follow up. And and I got a master's in counseling. That's once again, these skills are intersecting. But I would tell everyone, I tell young people all the time, try podcasting, not for a sense of getting a job, but it's just a tool for your skill development.
Yeah.
It could be a technology. You got in Puerto Rico, tell them kids to do a mini series of podcasting, just to try something new, learn how to write questions down and interview each other. It is a good skill building tool.
Robbie has started building podcast studios for schools specifically because of these skills that you're talking about.
Yeah, learn how to play around and tinker with the equipment. Learn how to, one person that likes to ask good questions. Learn how to edit it. I think we have at George Mason, we just launched the podcast club at George Mason, which is a student org, but the student org is meant for all majors just to take that podcasting hobby and make it contribute to something in their normal life, not just the creative students. So I think there's a lot of benefit to it. I say, do not wait to create. I think creativity is a great tool to teach you professional skills, transferable professional skills. And once again, I was going to do this anyway. Just not in my car. You know what I'm saying? I was going to do this anyway. I was going to talk anywhere or listen. So might as well. All right. Well, this is the great part of the show called shout outs and plugs. I got my notebook out right here. Shout out, show love to anyone you want to show love to. Don't get yourself in trouble. Shout out your spouses, your partners, whatever. But also plugs. These are things that I'll make sure to put in the show notes so that when someone listens to this episode, they get the show notes, the links, the resources, the way to follow up with you. They can do so, and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd like to shout out the team, TechMySchool. We're not a one-man gang here. It's a full team. Locally here in Puerto Rico, we have people who work with us internationally in Nigeria. Kyle, obviously. So thanks to the TechMySchool team. And then if you would like your school to have an opportunity to get discounted software, maybe you want a Brain Pop or Nearpod or something like that at a discounted price, reach out to us. We'll get it for you. If you want to do the tech analysis and audit to help that tech plan, we love to come in and do it for you. We do the first part free. So you can go to techmyschool.org and just reach out to us on the contact or info@techmyschool.org. Or if you want to do the entire process yourself without us, we have a software we created called Tech Plan Genie. And that's one in which you can take with your school. You go through all the modules that we develop, and then the AI helps you build the tech plan automatically without us. There's a project module in it, as well as an end-of-year report. So it's a really great software. And all the proceeds help TechMySchool serve America's most underserved and underprivileged schools in Puerto Rico. If you want your kids to come to Puerto Rico and do a week without walls, we'd love to have you. And just reach out. We anyone who's listening to this, we're open for partnership, whether you're an educator in schools or even if you're not. We work with universities, companies, it doesn't matter. So we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and we also love, I would say, continue to exist because of the donations that we get from other people. So a big part of my role here being on the mainland is to help drum up supplies and donations. So we have a lot of schools here in the Houston area, but we don't say no to anybody. If you have, say, in schools, a lot of times people will have a cycle that they go through where every 4 years, 5 years, whatever, they get new computers. If you're looking for a place to put them to use to have a second life, hit us up, techmyschool.org. There's a contact form on there, or hit us up at info@techmyschool.org. And we would love to chat with you about any donations. We take care of all the shipping. Actually, one of the philanthropic connections we have is with the shipping company. And because Puerto Rico is part of the United States, there's no customs to pay. So we can ship from just about anywhere in the continental US to Puerto Rico for pretty reasonable prices. And we take care of the cost of shipping. So hit us up if you've got any, got any stuff you want to donate.
Or at the very least, just follow us on Instagram. You'll get to see the daily work. We post every single day, all the work that we're doing in schools, donating, training teachers, all that stuff. So you're just kind of curious, what do those schools look like in Puerto Rico? What are these guys doing? Go to Instagram at TechMySchool, follow us, and you can see it yourself.
Yeah, shout out to all the schools and companies that have donated already. So we love you guys. Appreciate all that you've done for these kids.
Well, thank you, Robbie, and thank you, Kyle. This has been a great episode. Always a pleasure when unexpectedly I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today. For those that listen to Positive Philter, as you know, every episode is dedicated to the memory of my late father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch, and all the work he did fighting food insecurity. So please consider donating to the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund. Additionally, if you're a part of the Mason Nation, please consider submitting a Pats for Patriots to share kindness with someone else. Like, subscribe, elevate what they're doing at TechMySchool. Stay in touch, and all the information will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening to this podcast, Positive Philter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.